At a family gathering, my husband screamed at me that I wasn't worthy of being a mother. What happened next shocked even his mother. I still remember the sound of the fork hitting the plate. It was sharp, metallic, cutting through the silence of the room except for my husband's voice. A voice that had just said something so vicious, it felt like someone stabbed me right in the chest. "You're not worthy of being a mother." No one moved. No one said a word. But a few people smiled. One of his cousins laughed out loud. An aunt adjusted her wine glass. His mother looked away. And I stood there, frozen. It's strange how just one sentence can fracture the foundation of an entire marriage. But to be honest, that foundation had been trembling for a long time. I had just been too afraid to look straight at the cracks. Let me take you back to the beginning, because what happened that day wasn't sudden. It was the final blow in a long string of slow, quiet, merciless fractures. My name is Lana. I'm 32 years old. And for the past 4 years, I had been trying to become the kind of woman the Elliott family could accept. Someone gentle, agreeable, pleasant. A version of myself even I could barely recognize. When I first met Elliott, he was charming, confident. He had a steady job in finance and was admired by everyone around him. He appreciated art and seemed genuinely interested in my work as a freelance illustrator. He remembered the small things, like how I preferred oat milk in my coffee, or how I couldn't stand the smell of strong perfume. We fell in love quickly, maybe too quickly. But his family? That was a whole different story. From the very first meeting, I sensed something. A quiet disapproval, veiled comparisons, questions wrapped in passive-aggressive humor. "So you're an artist? Like drawing as a hobby? Your parents didn't go to college, did they? And Elliott?" He laughed along, brushed it off like it was nothing. "That's just how they are," he said. "You're reading too much into it." Maybe I was, at first. But over time, those little jokes became sharper, more pointed, more obviously cruel. And Elliott slowly stopped defending me. Eventually, he didn't even pretend to care. Every family gathering became a test, a performance, smile, nod, laugh at jokes even when they cut deep. Pretend I didn't hear the whispers behind my back about my sloppy style, or the time his mother said, "You'd be so pretty if you just did something with your hair." And yet, I stayed. Because I loved him. Because I kept telling myself it would get better. Because sometimes in the middle of the night, Elliott would wrap his arms around me and say, "You're mine. I'm so lucky to have you." But love should never make you shrink yourself. That family gathering happened on a Sunday at the end of spring. One of his cousins had just announced her pregnancy, so the family decided to throw a celebratory brunch. I was in the middle of a project, but Elliott insisted I come. "Just for a bit," he said. "Everyone wants to see you." I didn't believe him, but I went anyway. The house was crowded, loud, filled with voices I didn't want to hear. His mother hugged me with one arm. His aunt handed me a glass of wine without asking if I wanted one. Everyone acted like we were all close, as if I hadn't been quietly mocked by the same people over and over again. We were halfway through our croissants when it happened. Someone asked when we were planning to have children. It was a simple question, one I'd heard 100 times. I was used to brushing it off with a polite smile and a vague answer. But this time, Elliott answered for me. And what he said shattered everything. "You think she could be a mom?" He laughed, glancing around the table like everyone was in on the joke. "She'd probably forget the baby at a coffee shop." People laughed. First, a few chuckles, then louder. Then he turned to me, looking me right in the eyes. "You're not worthy of being a mother." There it was, the truth. Or at least his version of it. Something inside me went quiet. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was a coldness, a kind of silence the soul creates when it finally gives up on being heard. I stood up slowly. No one stopped me. Not Elliott, not his mother. I walked out of that room without looking back. But in that moment, something inside me woke up. Something strong, clear, sharp. Something I had buried beneath 4 years of forced smiles and swallowed tears. They thought that was the end. But really, it was just the beginning. I didn't go home that night. Truth is, I don't even remember where I drove. I just knew I needed to get away from everything. Away from the house I once shared with my husband, away from Elliot's messages, and away from the judgmental eyes of the people who used to call me family. My car stopped in front of Marley's apartment, my best friend from college. We hadn't seen each other much lately, not because we drifted apart, but because I had slowly withdrawn. I didn't want anyone to see the cracks in my marriage. When I knocked on her door at dusk, eyes swollen and carrying nothing but a small handbag, she didn't ask a thing. She just said, "Come in. You've always got a place here." And that's when I finally cried. No more holding back. The tears poured out uncontrollably. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to fall apart. The next 3 days passed like a blurry dream. Marley let me stay in her room, made hot soup for me, and respected my silence when I didn't want to speak. Sometimes she gently asked, "Ready to talk yet?" I'd just shake my head. I needed time, not to forget, but to see things clearly. On the 4th morning, I woke up at 6. The sky was still dark. I sat up, picked up my phone, and turned it on for the first time since I left. 19 missed calls from Elliot, 5 from his mom. The rest were messages from the family group chat. I read them all. Each message felt like a punch to the chest. "Lana, you're overreacting. You made everyone uncomfortable. How long are you going to stay mad? Marriage is about compromise." It was just a joke. Everyone laughed. "If you don't come back, you're the one tearing this family apart." I read them all, but not a single apology. No one acknowledged how deeply I'd been hurt. They didn't see anything wrong. They just wanted me to return to playing the role of the agreeable wife and the ever-accommodating daughter-in-law. Something heavy sank inside me. A quiet kind of weight. I opened the chat called The Elliots, the family group on his side. What I saw chilled me. A meme of me looking furious, face red, with a caption that read, "Forecast, emotional storm incoming." Underneath were rows of laughing emojis and jokes from his family members. They were mocking me, openly, after everything. I turned off my phone. My whole body trembled. My throat tightened. Marley had just woken up and walked by. She saw the look on my face and sat down next to me. I handed her the phone without saying a word. She read it and her eyes filled with tears. She squeezed my hand and said, "You don't deserve this. You were right to walk away. I'm here for you anytime you need me." I looked at her, and in her calm, steady eyes, I found something I thought I had lost. I wasn't alone anymore. That night, I opened my notebook and started writing. Not to defend myself, but to remember. I wrote down everything. Every cruel comment. Every time I was humiliated. Every night I cried into my pillow while Elliot turned his back and slept like nothing ever happened. I made a list. Not of what they did, but of what I had allowed. Just to hold that marriage together. I stayed silent when his mother said I didn't know how to be a wife. I pretended to laugh when his cousin mocked my clothes and said I looked like a runaway. I apologized for not having a child yet, even though I was the only one getting tested and treated. I cried myself to sleep after the nights he stayed out without explanation. I tolerated it. I made excuses. I lied to myself and called it love. But it wasn't. It was manipulation. It was emotional abuse. It was repeated disrespect that I had endured for years. And I let it happen because I was scared. Scared of being called selfish. Scared of being blamed for breaking the family. Scared of being alone and judged. But now, the thing I feared the most was having to live like that for even one more day. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer. I didn't tell Elliot. I didn't reply to anyone. I only knew one thing. If they refused to hear my voice for 4 years, then this time I would make them listen with everything I had. 1 week later, I received a message from Elliot. He wanted to meet, not just with me, but for a family dinner to make peace. I read that short message over and over, trying to find something sincere in it. But all I could see was convenience. They didn't want to apologize. They just wanted to smooth things over as quickly as possible to protect appearances. I didn't respond right away. I thought about it for 3 days before replying, "I'll come." Marley watched me as I packed a folder into a thin leather bag. She asked, "Are you sure?" I nodded. "It's not to reconcile." She smiled gently, immediately understanding. "It's to end it." The dinner was held at an Italian restaurant, the kind the Elliott family always chose for special occasions. Soft yellow lighting, crisp white tablecloths, faint music in the background, and polite smiles. Everything was so polished I could smell the artificiality the moment I stepped in. I arrived exactly on time, not a minute early. Elliot stood to pull out my chair, as if we were still the picture of a perfect couple. I sat down and unfolded my napkin without looking him in the eye. Around the table were all the familiar faces. His mother, the aunt who always had something cruel to say, the cousin who mocked me at the last party, a few others I didn't even bother remembering. Everyone smiled politely, as if my husband hadn't screamed at me that I wasn't worthy of being a mother. No one brought it up. His mother began in a syrupy tone. "Lana, I know you're going through some complicated feelings, but in this family, we learn to forgive and move on." I smiled and looked at her for a long moment. Then I replied softly, "I've already learned, Mom. And tonight I brought a few notes so the rest of you can learn with me." I opened my bag and pulled out a neatly clipped stack of papers. The top page had a bold title, "Things That Were Never Said." The room fell completely silent. I stood up, calmly, as if I were presenting a project. "I'd like to share a few things, because if we really are a family, then this is the moment to face things. Honestly." I flipped to the first page. The first day I met my mother-in-law, she asked if I knew how to cook and said women who can't cook easily lose their husbands. I laughed and said I would learn, but inside I felt judged from the very first moment. I turned to the next page. "On our engagement night, your cousin said in front of my friends that I looked like a street vendor because I wore a long floral dress." Everyone laughed. No one said a word. Neither did I. I paused for a moment and looked at Elliot. "Do you remember that?" He said nothing. I continued, my voice steady. "For 4 years, I've been called overly sensitive, humorless, someone who draws like a child, someone not strong enough to be a mother. And the peak of it all came last week, when you screamed in front of everyone that I didn't deserve to have children. And everyone laughed." No one was laughing anymore. I placed the stack of papers in the center of the table. "And this is why I came tonight." I pulled out a white envelope and placed it gently on top of the stack. I slid it toward Elliot. Everyone held their breath. He looked at me and forced a tight smile. "Lana, what are you doing? This isn't the way—" I cut him off. "No, Elliot. This is the way I choose." I looked him straight in the eyes. "You once said I didn't deserve to be a mother. Maybe you were right. Maybe I don't deserve to be a mother in a family like this. But I am absolutely sure I don't deserve to be the wife of a man who humiliates me in front of the world and expects me to apologize afterward." He picked up the envelope, opened it, and his face turned pale when he realized what it was. Divorce papers, signed by me. His mother whispered, almost choking, "Lana, you can't." I turned to her, my voice as light as a breeze. "I can, and I already did." I stood up and folded my napkin, setting it beside my glass. I looked around the table, taking in the faces that once held pride and superiority, now awkward and frozen like statues. I used to think family was the place you could always return to, but some places wear you down the longer you stay. and I don't want to spend another day feeling like a shadow in my own life. No one said a word. The only sound was the soft clink of someone's spoon hitting their plate, dropped in shock. I walked away. Each step out of that restaurant felt like a chain breaking loose from my body. It started to rain lightly as I stepped out into the street. Cold, but I felt free. For the first time in a very long time, I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat, clear and strong. And I knew this was only the beginning. After that evening, I never went back to the house we shared. I returned to Marley's apartment, took off my shoes, hung up my coat, and poured myself a glass of water. Not a single tear fell. There was no wave of panic like I had imagined. Just silence. But it was a different kind of silence. Not suffocating, not frightening, just peaceful. My phone started buzzing the next morning. Elliot called several times. When I didn't answer, he switched to texting. At first, the messages were filled with surprise and disbelief. He asked where I was, why I had done this. Are you really serious about this? I didn't think you'd actually sign. Lana, you can't leave me over one slip of the tongue. I read them all, but didn't reply. By the second day, the messages shifted to blame. You've destroyed everything. You embarrassed my mother in front of the entire family. You're so selfish. I didn't feel pain anymore. I didn't even feel angry. I just felt tired. Elliot never once asked how I was feeling. There was no genuine apology in any of his words. All he cared about was the image that had shattered on the floor that night. His family didn't stay silent either. His mother messaged me saying I was burying my chance of becoming a mother in a decent family. His cousin left a snide comment on one of my old posts. The same people who once laughed at my face now called me manipulative and said I was emotionally abusive for causing drama. I locked all my social media accounts. I didn't want their noise to crawl into my mind anymore. Meanwhile, I started to rebuild my life. I contacted a divorce attorney. Her name was Dorothy, a calm and firm woman in her 50s. After hearing my story, she said one thing: "We're going to handle this cleanly and safely for you." I gathered my belongings from the old apartment while Elliot was away. Marley came with me. We didn't take anything except what I had bought with my own money. No furniture that could lead to disputes. Just a few suitcases of clothes, some paintings I had done, a few books, and my laptop. When I walked into that apartment for the last time, I noticed our wedding photo still hanging on the wall. I looked at it for a few seconds, then turned away. There was nothing worth keeping. I rented a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood not far from downtown. It wasn't big, but it had wide windows, good lighting, and most importantly, no one inside but me. On my first night there, I sat among the unpacked boxes, held a cup of tea, and let the soft hum of the radio play in the background. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't play music. I just wanted to hear myself breathe. I thought I would feel empty, regretful, broken, but I didn't. What I felt was relief and a sadness that wasn't bitter. I felt sad for the years I had spent living like I wasn't worthy of real love. I slowly returned to my art. At first, I took on small commissions from past clients. I also started drawing memories, not to hold on to them, but to let them out of my mind. Marley stayed close. Every weekend, she'd stop by with groceries, cook meals, bring pastries, and chat about silly things like a new jacket or how the neighbor's cat was getting fat. Little things that made me smile. One day, as I was sketching by the window, the doorbell rang. It was a package from the law office. I opened it. It was a copy of the temporary divorce confirmation. The final hearing would be scheduled in a few weeks. I placed the folder on the table and looked at it quietly. I knew some doors, once closed, would never open again. But there are also doors that, when shut at the right time, allow you to finally see the whole sky. And after all those years of darkness, I was finally starting to see a little light. I thought everything had finally settled. My new apartment slowly turned into a true little sanctuary. I unpacked the last of the boxes, rehung my paintings, bought a few potted plants to place near the window. I started having quiet mornings, reading a book, sipping hot coffee, listening to the wind passing through the trees outside, and feeling my mind grow calmer with each passing day. I no longer curled up in bed, haunted by the voices from Elliot's family. I no longer checked my phone 10 times an hour, waiting to see if someone would call just to guilt me or manipulate me with words wrapped in fake kindness. I assumed Elliot would eventually give up. I had signed the divorce papers. I had left nothing behind. I had disappeared from every group chat. I had closed every single door. But then he came back. It started with a few random calls. I didn't pick up. Then came emails. At first, they were polite, calm, asking how I was doing, saying he wanted to talk one last time to end things peacefully. I didn't reply. When I continued to stay silent, the emails grew longer. They were mixed with regret and accusation. He said he missed me. That night, he claimed, was just a slip of the tongue. That everyone gets angry sometimes. That I should have given him a chance to make it right. Then his tone changed. He wrote, asking if I plan to live in isolation forever. He said families are human, and everyone says things they don't mean. He asked if I was going around telling people he emotionally abused me. When I still said nothing, he took it further. One afternoon, as I returned from the bookstore, I saw someone standing at the entrance to my building. My heart clenched when I recognized Elliot. I stopped a few feet away. He wore a white shirt, no tie, his eyes sunken. He looked thinner than before. But I didn't feel pity. I only saw what I'd always seen behind that soft-spoken facade, the need to control. "I just want to talk," he said. "I have nothing to say." "Lana, please, just a few minutes. You're misunderstanding everything." I crossed my arms. I didn't move closer. "What am I misunderstanding?" "I never meant to hurt you. You know that. I was just joking. Everyone was joking." "So if I told you that moment was the most painful of my life, would it still be a joke to you?" He hesitated. "I'm sorry, but you overreacted." I let out a small laugh. It wasn't a happy one. "You know what's funny, Elliot? For 4 years, I kept asking myself if I was being too sensitive. I blamed myself for not being patient enough. I questioned whether I was just a terrible wife. And it was only when I left that I finally realized it wasn't me who failed to love right. It was you who never even tried." Elliot said nothing. He looked at me like he was trying to figure out someone completely new. A woman who no longer bowed her head. I kept going. "I gave you 100 chances to change. I stayed silent when you didn't defend me in front of your family. I stayed silent when you laughed with them. I stayed silent when you left me crying alone in the living room. But I'm not staying silent anymore." He took a step closer. "Lana, you can forgive. We can start over. I swear I'll be different." I stepped back. "I have forgiven you, Elliot, but not so we can start over. I forgave you so I could free myself." His expression began to shift. The fake calm cracked. I saw what I had seen before. Anger, frustration, and that familiar gaze that once made me feel too small to speak. But this time, I didn't lower my eyes. He raised his voice. "You're destroying this family just because of your pride." "No," I said clearly. "I'm protecting myself." Elliot turned and slammed his fist into the railing. A loud thud rang out. A few neighbors opened their doors to peek. He quickly adjusted his shirt and looked back at me. "You'll regret this, Lana. One day you'll realize you were too stubborn to hold on to something good." I looked him straight in the eye. Something good is never built on blind endurance. Then I turned and walked inside. I closed the door behind me. I stood there for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I only felt a deep sense of relief. 3 days later, I got an update from my lawyer. Elliot had responded to the divorce filing. He requested to renegotiate the financial terms, but no longer contested the divorce itself. That meant he knew he had lost. I felt a weight lift off my chest. That afternoon, I went for a walk in the small park near my home. I saw a mother playing with her son. The little boy laughed as she chased a ball down the hill. Both of them were glowing with joy. It was such a simple moment, but it made me stop and watch. For a long time, I had believed I wasn't worthy of being a mother. I let someone else's words become a chain that locked away my self-worth. But not anymore. I don't know if the future will bring me a new family. But if it does, I know one thing for sure. I won't enter it through compromise. I will love. I will trust. I will live as a woman who knows exactly what she deserves. And no one, not even the man I once called my husband, will ever make me forget that again. 1 year after that night, my life had completely changed. I no longer got out of bed each morning with the heavy feeling of a man lying next to me. I no longer stared at the clock every hour, no longer tried to predict someone else's mood to adjust my words accordingly. I no longer lived as though every action and decision I made needed someone else's approval. Now I live in a small but cozy apartment. It's not luxurious or spacious, but it is quiet enough that I can finally hear my own thoughts. Every morning, I make myself a cup of peppermint tea, open the window, and let the early sunlight pour in. I set a small wooden table by the window where I sit for hours to draw. Not because of a deadline, but because I want to. I create things that move me, no longer drawing to satisfy anyone else. I started receiving more orders. Some people messaged me saying my drawings made them feel lighter. Others said they saw themselves in the lines I sketched. That moved me deeply. Marley is still here. She no longer has to cook soup or coax me out of tears. Now, we sit down for meals and share stories that make us laugh. We go to weekend markets together, join outdoor yoga sessions, and sometimes host women-only movie nights at my place. I've met new friends too. Not as a wife tagging along with her husband, but as myself, a woman with her own stories, personality, and presence. There are days when I walk for hours just to experience the city on my own terms. No destination, no urgency. I've learned to slow down and see the beauty in small things, like the last golden leaf clinging to a branch, the laughter of a child in the park, or the way the sunset dips gently over a quiet street. I no longer feel like a broken piece of a shattered life. I have gathered every piece and put them back together with resilience and a new love for myself. Sometimes I still dream about the past. But in those dreams now, I'm no longer the one standing there silently enduring it. I am the one who walked away. The one who knew when to say enough. The one who chose herself. On the day I received the official divorce certificate, I didn't cry. I stood in front of the mirror and looked into my own eyes. Eyes that used to look tired were now brighter than ever. I put on a simple white dress, a touch of lipstick, and went out for dinner by myself. Not to celebrate the end, but to welcome a new beginning. I know the road ahead will still have hard days. There will be moments of doubt. There will be times I miss what once felt familiar. But this time, I know I won't go back. I no longer seek acceptance from others. I don't need anyone to tell me I am worthy, because I've learned to look in the mirror and remind myself that I am enough. I am good enough, strong enough, kind enough, and beautiful in my own way. I once believed I would always be a victim in my own story. But then I realized I didn't need someone else to stand up for me. I could stand up for myself and write the parts that were missing. I am not perfect. I've made mistakes. I've been weak. I've accepted things I didn't deserve. But I overcame all of it with awareness and a deep belief in my own worth. And if you're listening to this story, if you've ever found yourself in a love that made you shrink, in a home that made you feel small, or in a family that made you question your worth, I want you to know you are not alone. We all deserve a life full of light. No matter what the past looked like, we can still begin again from the very place we once thought was the end. And if no one stands with you, then stand with yourself. Because there is no freedom more beautiful than becoming fully, completely, and peacefully yourself. If you've stayed with me until the very end, thank you. Truly, thank you for taking the time to step into a story that wasn't easy, but was real. I didn't share this to complain. I shared it to remind someone, maybe you, that you are not the only one who has ever been overlooked, dismissed, or forced to give up parts of yourself just to hold on to something that only looked like love. We deserve more than that. And if you saw yourself in this story, if you've ever gone silent like I once did, then please stay with her side of the story. Here we share honest stories about pain, about standing back up, and about returning to our true worth. Every week you'll find a new story. Not polished fairy tales, but real moments from the heart. For anyone who's ever felt like they had to endure alone. If you believe in healing, if you believe in the power of choosing again, and if you believe that every woman has a voice worth hearing, then subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications, and keep walking with us. Because today's story may be ending, but the journey to healing continues. And I hope you'll walk it with me. This is her side of the story, where women who were once forgotten, dismissed, or dimmed can finally be seen, believed, and loved, starting with themselves.